moments when life like holds up a giant mirror and says, hey, buddy, you want to deal with this now, or should I bring it back again in like 5 years? Maybe bigger, like a midlife crisis, weird tattoo, divorce, your call. Yeah, life's so subtle. You never notice patterns in your life? Like dating the same kind of person and wondering why it doesn't work out? Yeah, life's subtle that way. So this talk on walking the path is really about how the pattern is the portal. It's the third talk in the Sovereign Self series. And, what if the thing that you're trying to escape is the very thing to liberate you? That's really the question. What if the very thing that you think is wrong with you is the very thing that is the pathway to liberation? I have a quick reflection on this, something that happened this week. The very thing that we think is our weakness is actually our greatest strength. I had the great pleasure of co-facilitating a GBTQ plus retreat with my spiritual brother and dear friend, Rocky Heron. And we were working with plant medicine and human design and alchemy. And one of the things that I saw about myself this week was a pattern that I have of thinking that I'm not smart because I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but this idea that I should have known better, right, came from childhood. I should have known better. I should have been able to see that thing that I was trying to do wasn't going to work out. And what I learned in conversations with my brother was that part of my design is to experiment, and that the experimenter pattern is to learn by, quote, trial and error. And as we learn, we then process that information and want to share it with others. Gee, what do you think I'm doing now? Right? So the very thing that I thought was my weakness, why can't I see this? Why didn't I know better? Why didn't I see that wasn't going to work out? Because I'm designed to investigate and experiment, and that turned what I thought was a deficit into a superpower. So this is the paradox, that patterns can feel like prisons, but they're actually portals with information and insight and opportunity and sovereignty. Carl Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So just to recap the arc of this series, our first talk was You're Not Broken, like shedding the identity of damage. And this has been a big journey for me this last year, is this uncovering this story that I'm broken, right? In all the ways that I think, because I'm not meeting some normative standard, what I think a spiritual teacher should be, or a man should be, or a gay man should be, or whatever, a man of my age, a man of my, whatever, that normative idea, and how that is a microaggression against myself and non-acceptance, and reinforces this story of brokenness. The second talk was called The Death of Victimhood, Reclaiming Radical Responsibility. And as we step into, I'm responsible for my life. If I'm not happy with the way things are, it's feedback, no failure, just feedback. But this is an opportunity for me to realize that I have agency in my life. And if I'm not happy or not fulfilled, then I get to change that. I get to create something new, because I'm a creator. I'm not a victim. I'm a creator, not a creature. Today's talk, the pattern is the portal, and it's decoding the loops and stepping through them. So what is a pattern? Little, habits, habitual thoughts, reactions, emotions, behaviors are all patterns, coping strategies that we develop to survive. Perfectionism, people pleasing, control, hyper success, avoidance, addiction, and the list goes on. All the rackets that we run, all the ways that we have created strategies to protect ourselves from feeling not enough, not loved, not belonged, not safe. There's neurological grooves and energetic imprints. These are repetitive patterns that become grooves. Literally, a fatty acid builds up along the axiom on the neurological path. And if a chemical electrical reaction is tripping down the axiom, it's like a domino. And this, when we have repetitive thought patterns that go down specific neural pathways, this is my really non-scientific way of explaining it. So for all of you neuroscientists out there, forgive me, but it's like hinging those dominoes together. So instead of it's big chunks, right? That fatty acid builds up to speed the transmission of the chemical electrical reaction, and we literally get caught in a groove. We get stuck in a rut. That's a neurological groove or an energetic imprint. That's a pattern. And then trauma loops and inherited lineage patterns. These are epigenetics and ancestral codes. Like every one of our ancestors' DNA, is in our DNA. And there's something ancient about that within us. And then these inherited lineage patterns, the way my father thought about things, the way, they're just so deeply ingrained. These are all patterns: habitual thoughts, reactions, emotions, behaviors, coping strategies, survival techniques, neurological grooves, epigenetic imprints, inherited lineage, trauma loops. But patterns aren't bad. They're brilliant adaptations. We adopted these things to keep us safe. But now that we've observed them, once they served us, but now they're asking to evolve. So the first piece is to recognize the pattern. Pattern recognition is the path to sovereignty, because you can't change what you don't see. So how do you spot a pattern? Well, repetitive emotional spirals. Like, I'm always dating the same kind of person, hoping for something different. My reactivity, when I'm reactive, something triggers me. My triggers, those are all repetitive emotional spirals. They're all patterns. In addition, noticing that you're thinking about, like, always ruminating. Rumination is another way to see a pattern. Repetitive behaviors, ways that you react and behave, all patterns. So it's like we start to flip. Why does this, keep happening to me? Especially in relationships, recurring relational dynamics. When you notice the same pattern in your relationship emerging, or whether it's an intimate relationship or work relationships or familiar relationships, or it's across all of those areas or domains, there are ways that we relate. Things that we think are just us. I'm just a perfectionist. I'm just a people pleaser. I'm just this way. I'm controlling. Those are repetitive patterns. They're coping strategies that we developed. And also, there's a somatic clue to this, right? When you notice tension in the body, when we shut down, when we're over efforting, trying too hard, numbing, compulsive behaviors, these are also clues, cues to seeing a pattern. These are how we spot the patterns. And then to move through the pattern, not around it, we have this 4-step alchemical process: to observe, feel, ask, and heal. To observe, witness the pattern with neutrality and curiosity. And then feel, allow the emotional charge, like, to be felt, not to be fixed, just to feel it. And then to ask empowering questions. What does this part of me need? What's the origin story of this pattern? And then we can heal, we can reparent ourselves, we can rescript, rewire with new choices and new presence. One of my favorite quotes is from Rumi: "The wound is the place where the light enters." It is the thing that we think is our wound. It is the thing that we think is our crack, that our flaw, that is actually our superpower, that is actually the invitation to move through the portal, to use those repetitive patterns as breadcrumbs to our most authentic self. And it's not a one and done, right? Each time we interrupt the pattern and choose differently, we create freedom. Sovereignty is not perfection. It's where the self is forged, moment by moment, choice by choice, noticing. And sometimes I won't notice the pattern. Sometimes I'll fall into that old way of being. Sometimes I'll catch it. The more I catch it, the more I'm interrupting that pattern, the more I'm developing a new neurological pathway. And it's a integration period until it's embodied. And there's a period of integration where we're sometimes noticing it, sometimes we're not. One of my favorite teachers from Agape, Reverend Kathleen McNamara, used to say, I'm not looking to never fall asleep again. I'm looking to wake up faster when I do. So we don't have to be perfect. It's not about perfection. It's just about waking up faster, just catching it sooner. And it's a choice. It's not perfection. So we from the loop, from the repetitive thought loop to liberation, as we embody sovereignty in action in our daily lives, as I catch this. So, this story that I shared with you about understanding my investigator and experimenter self as a way of understanding that a learning method that I have becomes a superpower for me to understand how I move through the world. This is the story of alchemizing a recurring pattern. It got alchemized. What is alchemy? Alchemy is basically the knowing that all things partake of the one thing, and if all things partake of the one thing, then all things are one. And if all things are one, we can shapeshift, we can transmute from one to the other. So I can use this energy of a recurring pattern, which might feel like, I'm stupid. Why do I always do this? I can't get out of my own way. We can use that energy to transmute it, to alchemize it into a portal of transformation. So I want to invite you to reflect this week on what's one pattern that's showing up for you lately. What might it be protecting you from? And what would stepping through that portal look like for you? So I just want to affirm in this moment that we honor the pattern, that we bless this protector. It was a protector. And I'm choosing the portal. I'm choosing to step through with courage and compassion and clarity. I am sovereign now. This is our affirmation. I am sovereign now. I honor the pattern. I bless the protective mechanism, and I choose to step through with courage and compassion and clarity. I am free. I am sovereign. So thank you so much for joining us today. This was a little shorter version of Walking the Path. We'll finish up with our 4th talk in the series, I Deserve Because I Am. That's our talk next week. I deserve because I am. You deserve. I deserve. Everybody deserves because they are. They are in consciousness. We deserve everything that we can have in consciousness. So I can't see a world that's peaceful and harmonious in my consciousness. I don't deserve to see it. We deserve what we have in the I am. That's next week. All right. Peace and choicest blessings, and I'll see you next week.